Hi, everyone. This is Kate. I am working with the film team behind the documentary Turning Point. I'm not sure who has heard of the film yet, but we're excited to share the trailer for the film with you. I'll be playing it momentarily. But the film Turning Point is a new documentary directed by James Keach, who is the director of Glenn Campbell, I'll Be Me. And Turning Point is about the quest for a cure, hence the film's poster, for Alzheimer's disease. The film synopsis is, where will the future of Alzheimer's research take us? The race to find treatments, if not a cure, for Alzheimer's disease has seen setback after devastating setback in recent years, prompting the medical and scientific community to question their answers about the underlying mechanisms of the disease. In the new documentary film Turning Point, acclaimed filmmaker and director James Keach follows a team of researchers on the front lines of Alzheimer's research and captures the raw disappointment and renewed hope of those working to find a cure for this fatal, incurable disease affecting nearly 5.7 million Americans. So I'm now going to show you all the film's trailer, and then I'm going to turn it over to Holly Barse, who will start to talk about her work and how it ties into the film.
Repeat after me. Apple, table, penny.
Apple.
The effort to develop a treatment for Alzheimer's suffered a blow yesterday when a clinical trial, at least a decade in the making, was halted.
Today, there are more people over 80 than ever before. In 2050, there will be 32 million seniors, triple what it is today. And 1 out of every 2 of us will have Alzheimer's disease.
I lost both grandmothers.
My granddad, my father-in-law,
An uncle, my dad.
my mother has Alzheimer's, so I may have it.
He didn't know my kids when they came to visit him. And can we get there soon enough?
No one's ever done this before. Nobody's come up with a disease-modifying medication for Alzheimer's.
You give a new medicine to somebody, it takes a long time to see whether that medicine's going to have any effect.
And 99.6% of all Alzheimer's trials fail.
I still remember just feeling my heart sink.
I actually had to leave there early.
I was just numb.
I've never seen a study that just missed on so many measures.
But then we kept looking.
We said, well, look, the studies weren't designed just to look at patients with mild disease.
And we looked at each other and
kept saying, you all have something here, don't you?
he said, we have a drug.
So there's excitement and there's hope. 2 words you never hear with Alzheimer's.
My 4-year-old's really into superheroes. And he saw an interview that I'd done where I was in the lab, had the lab coat on, and he just was like, Daddy, you're a scientist. And I never realized this. Almost every superhero starts off as a scientist.
They're not in the spotlight, but they are heroic characters fighting against all odds.
Imagine the impact if we could change the course of Alzheimer's disease.
Just because we think the brain is more complex than the universe itself doesn't mean it is. It just doesn't feel that way yet.
This is the final frontier in medicine.
We have to find the cure. Failure is not an option.
So that was the trailer. And now, Holly, would you like to start speaking about your work?
Sure. Hi, my name is Holly Barse. You actually saw several of my work colleagues in that trailer. And for those of you who have actually seen the film, it follows the course of a clinical trial where we believed we had found something that was actually going to work based on a signal we saw in an earlier trial. I work for a company called Eli Lilly, and we have been working in Alzheimer's disease for over 25 years. I had just started with the Alzheimer's disease team. At the time we found out we were going to have to do the study that was shown in that movie, Expedition 3. And as part of the shakeup that came up out of having to actually do another clinical trial, I ended up getting assigned to the clinical trial and helping out with recruiting it. During the course of that, I got to meet amazing people, work with some of the most brilliant people I've ever gotten a chance to work with. And I have spent my time in the space ever since. That would have been, around I think it was the end of 2012 when I joined the Alzheimer's disease team at Lilly. My background is marketing, so I'm not a medical person, but I have learned a lot about patients, the clinical trial sites and the people who work there. And I help recruit the program by connecting that information and making sure they have what they need to recruit for clinical trials. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about today was how to get involved in clinical trial research if that interests you. And I'm not going to speak to anything specific to Lilly research. Basically, I knew nothing about clinical trials when I joined the team. I was actually going to be working on the commercial side or in preparation for its approval. And I had to learn a lot. But here's some basics. One, of course, being with Eli Lilly, we're trying to find a medicine that will help with Alzheimer's disease. And so we deal with a class of clinical trials called therapeutic trials, and that is for testing medicines. There are 3 phases to clinical trials in humans. Phase 1 is really safety studies only. We don't look at efficacy. Phase 2 is really a trial run for the final stage of testing, where we look at both efficacy and safety. They're smaller number of geographies. So, the big phase 3 trials that Expedition 3 was part of are global in nature. Expedition 3, for example, included 11 countries. And I've seen clinical trials go as big as 23 countries. I mean, they're huge operations in the phase 3 space. And phase 2 will usually just use 1 or 2 countries. They are, by the time we get to phase 2 and phase 3, we have a pretty good sense of the safety of them. So in phase 3, although we continue to monitor for safety, that goes with any clinical trial, we are starting to really hone in on what outcomes the medicine can provide, what benefits we hope to get from it. And in the case of the Turning Point, Expedition 3, that first study I worked on, failed. And it just missed its endpoints, and it just missed every single one of its endpoints. So to put that in lay language, basically it worked a little bit. It just didn't work enough to commercialize. We didn't expect that outcome, and that movie really brought to life what it's like for these people who have spent their entire lives trying to find a cure, dealing with the moment when they thought they had it and found out they didn't finally have a solution. So here's how you can think about getting involved with a clinical trial. One, if you're noticing changes to your memory, job 1 is to let your doctor know. There's a good chance that you may find out that it is due to the lack of sleep you've gotten, or perhaps the extra drink you're having at night, or the stress at work. He can help you rule that kind of stuff out. But if it's changing over time, you might want to enlist the help of an expert. So all clinical trials are run by neurologists who are specializing in Alzheimer's disease, and many of them run programs where you can come in and get a free memory screening. Now, the memory screening is external. It really measures your cognition. It truly is a memory screen. And it can tell them a lot about where your memory is changing and what the possible causes for that could be and what other actions you can take to figure out what's going on. Yes, indeed, if it looks like you could be a candidate for research, they will talk to you about it. The important thing to remember, though, is that it's your choice. It's always your choice if you want to participate in clinical trials. And anytime you're in it, you're always at liberty to leave with no explanation required. Your safety is the #1 thing that governs these trials. And there's an amazing infrastructure worldwide that monitors for safety for patients. At Lilly, we have a couple ways to do it. We have an internal group, bioethics group, that looks and makes sure that patient safety is assured and monitored throughout. Our monitors don't work for Lilly, so you don't have the fox guarding the hen house, so to speak. We actually have external monitors who monitor our safety data, our medical data coming out of the trial and reporting back if they see trends that need to be monitored. So we although we're also watching, they're really the whistleblowers, and they have no obligation to the company except to monitor for that, for those safety concerns. All studies have to be reviewed by what's called ethical review boards or institutional review boards. These boards serve no other purpose than to ensure that patients are treated safely and ethically in clinical trials. And they review everything. They look at protocols, they look at the materials that we provide patients, the information we supply, the instructions for how to run the trial that we give the sites, and ensure that patient safety is appropriately managed throughout the trial. Participation in the trials can be pretty demanding if you're in a therapeutic trial. For example, a typical trial these days is many of these trials are testing biologics, which is a way of saying they're an infused drug. So you actually go to an infusion center, say every month, to get an infusion. You have to go through a pretty rigorous screening process. So they actually look at not just your memory, but they will probably do PET scans to see if we can actually see in the brain now what may be going on in there. And there are markers for Alzheimer's disease that can be discerned. You have to be at certain stages of memory loss in order to participate in certain clinical trials, and that varies. One of the other things but there are all kinds of trials, and I encourage you, if you're not comfortable, if you're not ready to consider a therapeutic trial, there are device trials. There's all kinds of things going on in terms of wearable biomarkers, like an Apple Watch now can do an EKG that we're testing to help us understand what it can tell us about the progress of the disease. So something as simple as that. There are lifestyle trials that are looking at the impact of diet and exercise on Alzheimer's disease. And my message to you would be get involved, because your contribution ultimately is the thing that creates medicine. And we can't do it without you. In fact, nothing happens without the volunteers in our clinical trial. So I hope you have questions, and why don't you just hold them till the end. I now have the great good fortune to introduce to you, Kim Campbell, and my cat's up here and causing trouble. Kim Campbell is the wife of Glenn Campbell. I first got to meet her, oh gosh, it would have been maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It was in Chicago. She was attending a screening with her truly charming children of the Glenn Campbell movie, I'll Be Me, and we were introduced. And the movie is so amazing and so moving that Lily really got behind it in a big way. I have had the opportunity to stay in touch with Kim, and she's spoken at some of our clinical trial meetings. She is an absolute incredible advocate for caregivers, which she was, and I really think it was truly heroic of her, the way she allowed James Keach, who was the director, to peek in their lives as Glenn began to decline, and throughout that tour he had, and even beyond, for the sake of providing support to caregivers worldwide. And so it's with great pleasure I introduce Kim to you, and I hope you love her stories as much as I have.
Well, hi everybody.
Over to you, Kim.
Thanks, Holly. I'm so happy to be here tonight, and this is, I think, the first webinar I've ever done, so I hope I'm able to do it right. But Glenn got diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2011, and we were faced with the decision of whether or not to just withdraw and stay home and hunker down and brace ourselves for what the disease would bring. But Glenn just said, I feel fine. I want to continue doing what I love with the people I love. So he made the decision to go public with the diagnosis and to go on tour and to continue to do music. And, we're talking about clinical trials, and we're talking about searching for some kind of a treatment or a cure. And what we found and what the doctors all concurred was that continuing to do music probably helped Glenn plateau and function longer socially and intellectually than he otherwise would have. I've talked to a lot of music experts, Daniel Levitin in particular, who wrote the book, This Is Your Brain on Music, which was a New York Times bestseller. But music seems to stimulate all the different regions of the brain at once and can perhaps even help in a process called neuroplasticity, help the signals find new pathways to connect and function. So music was good medicine for us. And in fact, we've just launched the Kim and Glenn Campbell Foundation to help fund the research of music as medicine. There are a lot of good organizations out there doing that, Daniel Levitin being one, and the Institute for Music Neurological Function in New York with Connie Tomeno is another. But it's a fascinating area, and I highly recommend it to caregivers out there to help their loved one in terms of, alleviating depression, modifying behaviors. If Glenn got agitated, I would put on, some music that I knew that he loved, and it would calm him down, help him go to sleep. And as most of you caregivers out there know, it's a truly devastatingly depressing thing to lose your spouse to this disease. And so music helped me overcome depression, along with dance, because I'm a dancer, and put on some happy music or some spiritual music that lifts your spirits, and it really helped. But we have a musical family, and if you haven't seen our film, I hope you'll watch it. A lot of caregivers out there told us that it helped them in terms of feeling seen and heard, because a lot of caregivers, they just feel like nobody knows what I'm going through. And really, unless you've walked in our shoes, no one really does. But hopefully our film can help your family and friends have a little bit of an understanding about what you're going through. But now I'm on the other side, and I want to also encourage people that there is life after Alzheimer's. I think becoming an advocate and getting involved in finding a cure has helped me a lot, because it gave me purpose. It brought purpose out of my pain. And it also networked me with so many other caregivers around the country that supported me. And I'm still in contact with those people. Even after the fact, many of us have already lost our husbands, and it's just become my family. The Alzheimer's community has become my family, and so I'm very grateful to be here tonight and to still be a part of it. Glenn helped remove the stigma of getting that diagnosis, and the other thing that I really want to work toward is helping remove the stigma of long-term care. Most of you know that it's a very difficult thing, and the journey just gets harder and harder and harder as you enter the later stages of the disease. And I don't think anyone should feel guilty for looking into long-term care, because there are some amazing memory care communities out there that are providing, a safe and secure community for people to belong to. I always say, because we opted for long-term care when Glenn got in the late stages of the disease, and I always say I didn't put my husband in a nursing home. I didn't place him somewhere. I say our family joined a memory care community because it became my community too. We were there with other families all going through the same thing, laughing together, crying together, praying for each other, supporting each other. And I just couldn't do it by myself at home. And even with my kids living with me, and it was just too difficult. And a memory care community can provide socialization and art therapy, music therapy, horticulture therapy. There's pets, there's life, there's energy. And sympathy, and I started a support group out of that experience with other spouses who had husbands with Alzheimer's or some form of dementia. And that's the only way I got through it. It's truly, truly a difficult journey. So I am writing a book about it. I'm hoping to get that out within the next year. But I think that I want to remove the stigma of long-term care, because so many people, if they opt for that, they just beat themselves up over it. But you really shouldn't feel guilty for doing what's best for your loved one, what's best for your children, and what's best for yourself. You have to take care of yourself too. I know I was experiencing, I think what David Shank calls in his book, The Forgetting, as caregivers dementia. I don't know if any of you all have experienced that, but it comes from depression, fatigue, stress, and my mind just got foggy. I felt like I was walking around in a cloud. I was so depressed and everything. And I used to be a real go-getter, you know, multitasker, dynamo, and it got to where I could only do one task at a time, and I felt like if I just accomplished one thing each day, I was doing great. So you need help. You need to reach out for help. You can't do this alone. And I didn't realize how important a support group was until I became a part of one, which I hesitated because my husband was famous and I didn't feel comfortable sharing, you know, information about my husband. But it happened organically by becoming a part of that community. So I don't want to go over my time. But hopefully, you know, if anyone has questions during the question and answer period, I'm very open about it, and I love to talk about it. So now I'm going to turn it over to Manisha Perulukar and let her introduce herself. And I look forward to chatting with you all soon.
Thank you, Kim. This is Dr. Manisha Perulukar. I'm Chief of Geriatrics at Hackensack University Medical Center, Hackensack Meridian Network in New Jersey. And of course, have been very actively involved in taking care of patients with dementia for the last 15 years. And I'm so appreciative of the speakers who have started this conversation talking about importance of clinical trials, talking about being open about the diagnosis, accepting help, letting people in to help you, talking about caregiver stress so openly. I think this is really important pieces of taking care of somebody who is having a diagnosis of memory disorder, dementia, Alzheimer's, various terminologies used back and forth. But at the end of the day, it is a continuous process, and it is so important for all of us to keep that in mind. And that's what we really have been trying to do in our center, in our dementia center, is to try to provide that comprehensive assessment, comprehensive continuous treatment plan, which does change from the mild cognitive impairment to the severe dementia, provide the caregiving and the family support, provide the social support by working with our community-based organizations very closely, and being there for the patients and their families, and telling them that yes, it is a tough journey. As the speakers have said before, it is really tough and challenging to see your loved one of 50 plus years being married, or your dad or your mom losing them in front of your eyes when they stop recognizing you, or when they start asking the same questions over and over. And I've had enough of my share of seeing patients getting Alzheimer's with all different varieties. I've seen people who have gotten dementia who had not gone to the school, and have enough patients with extensive masters and PhDs and physicians who have taken care of who have gotten this disease. So it is a tricky disease. It is a disease of aging, thankfully for a big part of it. And we still have a lot of puzzles and a mystery to solve. But it is going to be important for all of us to do our job, to do whatever we can to unfold this mystery so that we would have better solutions. And I definitely am looking and hoping that that solution would be available to myself as well. So I have a little bit of selfish motive in this as well. But again, I think as a community and as a population, we do have to figure out this disease, and we do have to figure out what really is happening and how can we help each other to make that difference. And despite of the disease being such a neurodegenerative or progressive disease, and until now we don't have any specific cures, there's so many things that we can do to try to slow down the progression, to try to identify it earlier on, and make a lot of different changes, as someone had mentioned earlier, talking about sleep, talking about diet, talking about substances, talking about your diabetes, your high blood pressure, and looking at it much earlier on, and throughout the disease, and being there and making those changes as we go along to help the patients and the families. It does make a big impact. And we sincerely feel, our group sincerely feels that that's what we bring to the table, providing that comprehensive care to our patients and our families, and not only looking just at the Alzheimer's, but looking at other medical conditions, looking at medications, which is a big part, which can make this disease progress faster, and minimizing these kind of insults, and changing the plan as the patient progresses, and make it tailored to that particular patient, understanding what their hobbies are, like music absolutely has amazing responses. So looking at those kind of aspects of the personal life, and helping patients and families make this journey a little bit less struggling is what really we'd like to do. So that's what we as geriatricians have been doing. And I think with this, I will hand over to the question and answer session.
Great. I think we're ready for the Q&A.
Awesome.
Who has questions? Jerry, you'll help us?
Yeah, nobody has their hand raised. If anyone has a question to ask, please push the little hand button. There was an attendee who had his hand raised, but he's no longer part of the webinar, so I don't know what his question was. But actually, I have a question. My wife has dementia, and I don't know if some of the Alzheimer's research that you guys are doing would pertain to dementia as well.
I would certainly defer to Manisha if she wanted to comment on this, but I will tell you that Alzheimer's disease accounts for about 2/3 of dementia. So it is a type of dementia. There are many others, and it's the most common type of dementia. So, you know, it's without knowing more about her case, and I'm not a medical person, I couldn't, you know, I wouldn't be able to interpret her symptoms, but I'd say, you know, that there are, you know, yes, a lot of these things that we're looking at, we're also studying in other disease states or other forms of dementia as well.
That's great.
I was going to echo the similar. Yes, we are looking at, of course, we are looking at Alzheimer's the most closely because that is the most common type of dementia. But there are parallel things going along, looking at other types of dementias as well.
Okay. Yeah, my wife has dementia that's related to multiple sclerosis.
And yes, and it is the same neurodegenerative process. So there are places trying to look at, are there any cross-reactivities, or are there any medications that could try to stop this neurodegenerative process and hopefully help with the preventing the progression?
Well, that's good. Well, I'm looking forward to anything that can help, Alzheimer's plus all the other dementia that's out there as well. We do have a question from Terry Corcoran. She's asking, can Kim please tell the caregivers she meets about us? Well, spouse.
I'm sorry, what is she asking? Can you repeat that, please?
Hey, if you could tell the other spousal caregivers about our organization, Well Spouse Association.
Well, I certainly would love to do that. In fact, I was just thinking, I hadn't mentioned my website, which is careliving.org. It's a website I started. It's a blog and educational resource to encourage caregivers to take care of themselves while they care for the ones they love. So I will definitely try to do that on my Facebook page because it sounds like it's a great organization. Like I said, nobody knows what it's like except others who are going through it. So we have a great online community, and I encourage everyone to join us on Facebook. It's not super active right now because I've taken some time off after Glenn passed away to write my book, but I will certainly try to get your website up on my Facebook page and let people know about it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and we'll circulate yours as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And you're correct in saying that nobody knows what a caregiver goes through except another caregiver. And, as you know, spousal caregiving adds a whole other dimension to caregiving. It's easy to care for a parent or a child, but as you know, it's not easy to care for a spouse. There are some unique situations that a spousal caregiver will face that a parental or somebody taking care of a parent or a child will not face, and it makes it all that more difficult for us.
Absolutely.
All right, so do we have any other questions or any comments? If anyone has a comment.
Well, I learned a lot tonight. Thank you so much for having me on, and it's great to talk to you and Holly. It's great to hear your voice, and Manisha and Kate. Thank you all, and Jan for organizing this. It's been a wonderful experience.
Yeah, yes, I
agree.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This was great. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
No more questions.
Okay.
I will close the meeting.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you all for attending, and thanks for the presenters for presenting. Thank you.
My pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.